Good evening and welcome to the Capitol Report on NTD Television. I'm Steve Lance. Coming up tonight, President Trump announcing a bold new peace plan for Gaza and a tariff that could shake up Hollywood. President Trump meeting with the top 4 congressional leaders today to try to avert a government shutdown. But Democrats maintain they will force the shutdown if their demands are not met. And is that shutdown inevitable? Florida Congressman Randy Fine joins us with perspective from Capitol Hill. And the investigation into Sunday's Michigan church shooting continues. Officials working to establish a clear motive of the attack, which has now left 4 people dead. And on our panel this evening, who would Americans blame for a government shutdown if it happens? And what does Eric Adams bowing out of the New York City mayoral race mean for the remaining candidates?
This is Capitol Report, live from our global headquarters in our nation's capital. Here's Steve Lance.
President Trump alongside the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the White House today unveiling a 20-point plan to end the war in Gaza. Joining us now live is NTD's Washington correspondent, Mari Otsu. Good evening, Mari. So tell us, what is the latest that you're hearing from the president's meeting with the Prime Minister earlier today?
Sure, Steve. Good evening. Yes, today Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and President Trump were here in the state dining room, and President Trump is announcing his 20-point plan to end the war in Gaza. So the plan lays out an immediate ceasefire and a phased withdrawal of Israeli troops. And if and when Hamas accepts the deal, Hamas must then release all hostages, both living and dead, within 72 hours. Gaza will then have a temporary transitional government overseen and supervised by a so-called Board of Peace, which will be headed by President Trump himself. And here's the president expressing his hope for Palestine after the war comes to an end. Watch.
And I challenge the Palestinians to take responsibility for their destiny, because that's what we're giving them. We're giving them responsibility for their destiny, fully condemn and prohibit terrorism and earn their way to a brighter future. They don't want the life that they've had. They've had a rough life with Hamas.
President Trump's proposal also states that once all the hostages are released, Israel will then release 1,700 Gazans who were detained after the October 7 attacks. And any Hamas members who commit to a peaceful coexistence and agree to lay down their weapons will be granted amnesty. President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu, who says he accepts the deal, are calling on Hamas to also accept it, but are prepared for this if Hamas rejects it. Watch.
Hamas rejects the deal, which is always possible. They're the only one left. Everyone else has accepted it. But I have a feeling that we're going to have a positive answer. But if not, as you know, Bibi, you'd have our full backing to do what you would have to do.
But if Hamas rejects your plan, Mr. President, or if they supposedly accept it and then basically do everything to counter it, then Israel will finish the job by itself.
This is coming just after President Trump hosted a trilateral phone call with Prime Minister Netanyahu and Prime Minister Al-Thani of Qatar, a key intermediary with Hamas. In this call, Netanyahu apologized for unintentionally killing a Qatari serviceman during Israel's missile strike against Hamas targets in Doha. He also promised that Israel will not attack Qatar again in the future. Steve?
So, Mari, while the president was clearly focused on peace in the Middle East today, as well as averting a government shutdown looming in less than 48 hours, he also managed to get an executive order in with regard to Hollywood. What can you tell us about this latest move?
Sure, Steve. So President Trump It's not an executive order, but he's pledging to impose a 100% tariff on any movies made outside the U.S., adding that the California market has been hit the hardest. Countries like Canada and the UK offer tax breaks to bring American film production overseas, so many Hollywood movies are now at least partially shot or edited abroad. President Trump called attention to this in May, calling those tax incentives a national security threat that result in propaganda. It remains unclear when or how this film tariff will be enacted, and if it will affect distributors, producers, or both. Steve, back to you.
Certainly a lot going on. NTD's Mariotsu live from the White House. Thanks so much, Mari. Meanwhile, another legal victory for President Trump. YouTube today agreeing to pay $24.5 million. This all to settle a lawsuit filed by the president. The case was brought over the suspension of his YouTube account after the January 6th Capitol breach back in 2021. Under the settlement, $22 million will be going to a nonprofit which is dedicated to help build the White House State Ballroom that has been requested and mandated by the president. The rest will be paid to other plaintiffs, including the American Conservative Union. After Meta and X, YouTube is the latest social media firm to settle a lawsuit with President Trump. And with fewer than 48 hours until a potential government shutdown, the top 4 congressional leaders of both parties meeting with President Trump at the White House today. Our Washington correspondent Luis Martinez joins us in studio to discuss what came of the encounter. So, Luis, what are Democrats' demands and why are they ultimately threatening this shutdown?
Well, Steve, this is political theater at its finest, or its worst, depending on how you want to see it. Let me lay the groundwork first before we hear from Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer. So the first thing that we need to contextualize is that Senate Democrats have already voted for current levels of funding 13 times before. They voted for continuing resolutions 13 times before, and current levels of funding were actually set under the Biden administration. And the second thing that we need to know is that what Democrats are demanding is the extension of enhanced healthcare tax premiums that were passed under the Democratic-led reconciliation bill back in 2021. So that's COVID-era unilateral Democratic policy that was passed 4 years ago. Now we're no longer in COVID era. There's no health emergency, but Democrats want to force Republicans to extend these tax credits, which it was Democrats who set the expiration date for these tax credits that are expiring next month. Now let's listen to what Senator Chuck Schumer had to say about the meeting with President Trump.
Their bill has not one iota of Democratic input. That is never how we've done this before. When I was leader, we negotiated 4 times with Republicans, and we never had a shutdown. And so it's up to the Republicans whether they want to shut down or not. We've made to the president some proposals. Our Republican leaders will have to talk to them about them, but ultimately he's the decision maker.
So, as I was mentioning, political theater, because it is a bipartisan bill. These current levels of funding, that is what Republicans are trying to achieve, were established with Democrats. And secondly, Senator Chuck Schumer is saying that it's up to Trump whether there's a shutdown or not. And that's also not necessarily accurate, since it's Congress who has the power of the purse, and it's lawmakers, senators, who are supposed to establish a government funding bill, and not President Trump.
And to the Minority Leader Schumer's point, when he was leader, that was because people in his position now came to the table to make an agreement, if I'm reading that correctly. So what is the Republican proposal ultimately to avert this government shutdown?
Well, it's exactly what you just mentioned. So Republicans historically, both in the House and the Senate, have opposed continuing resolutions. Actually, the current congressional Republicans campaigned on reducing government spending, and they usually promise that they will oppose continuing resolutions, but they've extended an olive branch to Democrats by voting for a continuing resolution to keep the government open, avert a shutdown, and continue negotiations to see if they can get government funding through the appropriate plans and how it's supposed to in the regular order. So the plan that's now on the table is that House Republicans have already passed a continuing resolution. Now it's gone to the Senate. Senate Democrats have rejected it. Let's listen to what Senate Majority Leader John Thune said about this House Republican continuing resolution.
This is purely and simply hostage taking. on behalf of the Democrats. The Republicans are united. House Republicans, Senate Republicans, President Trump. The House has passed a clean funding resolution to fund the government till November the 21st. It's clean. It is bipartisan.
And Steve, Republicans in the House and the Senate both have agreed that they're open to negotiating with Democrats on a possible extension of these enhanced healthcare tax credits that Democrats so badly want, but they don't want to do it as a part of a funding negotiation where Democrats are actually demanding to get a maximalist approach to their demands or force a shutdown. So again, Republicans passing a clean CR, something that they usually oppose, and you have the likes of Chip Roy and Marjorie Taylor Greene voting for this, and also being open to extending healthcare tax credits for the American people, but not within the context of a government funding battle.
So, Louise, if this is indeed the continuing resolution is passed, that only brings us to November of this year.
Correct.
Is that correct? And so, what is the White House's position, and why do you think President Trump is inserting himself, and ultimately, who's holding the cards here?
Well, the White House has had to insert itself into this debate, brought the top 4 congressional leaders to the White House to see if they can find a way to avert a government shutdown. As I mentioned before, it's up to Congress to fund government. The White House should have nothing to play in this scenario. The White House has already informed government agencies, is bracing itself for an imminent government shutdown, and has asked for agencies to be prepared, which is not something that the Trump administration has publicly said that they want to do, to be prepared to lay off or furlough any personnel that is not essential to the workings of the federal government. So at the end of the day, Republicans are in the majority in the House, they're in the majority in the Senate, and they have the White House. So in any other scenario, you'd have Democrats that would have to come to the table to try and avert a government shutdown. But that's what I said at the beginning. It's pure political theater. These are all messages that will serve both parties during the midterm election campaigns. And of course, in this case, Democrats want to blame Republicans for any lapse in their health care or any government shutdown, which is not necessarily accurate.
The messaging battles begin. NTD's Luis Martinez, thank you so much. And joining us now to discuss, we have Congressman Randy Fine, I believe, Congressman. And the Congressman will be joining us shortly. The FBI's Detroit field office is continuing to investigate Sunday's Michigan church shooting. The head of the office saying they're determined to establish the killer's motive. NTD's Arlene Richards has more.
Several investigators on Monday said they are focused on finding out what motivated a former Marine to allegedly ram a pickup truck into a church and open fire. Authorities say the suspect, identified as Thomas Jacob Sanford, age 40, plowed through the front door and began shooting with a semi-automatic rifle. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in Michigan was in the middle of a crowded service at the time of the shooting. According to an official from the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the attacker apparently used gasoline to start a fire, setting the church ablaze. 4 people were killed and 8 were injured, 2 of whom are still in critical condition. At a news conference Monday, the acting head of the FBI Detroit field office said they were working together with all levels of government, local, state, and federal.
The FBI is investigating this as an act of targeted violence, and we are continuing to work to determine a motive. In the past 24 hours, our investigative squads and specialty teams have been out all night, exhausting leads, some of which have been coming in from the public via tips.
He said his office is getting assistance from other field offices across the country. According to the local police chief, they are still clearing out the church, but everyone is now accounted for. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer also attended the press conference.
As I said, I'm here as the governor, but I'm also here as a fellow Michigander whose heart is breaking by another mass shooting in a place that is supposed to be defined by togetherness.
Whitmer said this is one of the many shootings that have occurred in recent years, including at schools, stores, parades, festivals, and houses of worship. She said she had spoken with President Trump, who offered his condolences. The attack is the second on an American church in little over a month. Arlene Richards, NTD News.
And coming up, President Trump challenging the Palestinians to take responsibility for their own destiny. What's in his 20-step plan, and will it see the light of day? We'll discuss that with retired Lieutenant Colonel Hal Kempfer. And is religion being undermined in American schools? The Justice Department's Religious Liberty Commission takes a close look. That and more when we return.